It was the dead of winter when he found her. The snow fell steadily, quiet as a sigh, covering the mountains and valleys in a blanket of white. A bitter wind blew through the trees, carrying with it a distant, faint cry, a sound not of an animal, but of something sorrowful, something broken. He was a man of the mountains, living alone in a small, humble cabin. His life was simple. The solitude was not cruel. It was the kind of loneliness that is filled with peace, with the rhythm of nature as your only companion. He asked for little. He expected nothing more than the earth beneath his feet and the sky above his head. But when he heard that cry, he couldn't ignore it. He followed the sound, through the forests where the trees stood like silent sentinels, their balance heavy with snow. The cry grew louder as he approached, until finally, beneath a crooked pine tree, he found her. A crane, caught in a hunter's trap. Her wing was twisted, the metal cruelly pinning her to the earth. Her feathers, normally so white and pure, were stained with blood. The bright red streak against the white snow, normally so white and pure, were stained with blood. The bright red streaks against the white snow. She looked at him then, eyes dark and wide, filled with an understanding that he could not comprehend. In that moment, it was as if she was not a creature of the wild, but a being who could see into the depths of his heart. Without a word, he knelt beside her, his hands cold and trembling, as he pried open the trap. It took only a few moments, but to him it felt like a lifetime. Once free, the crane did not fly away immediately. Instead, she stood there for a long moment, gazing at him with those knowing eyes. And then, with a graceful beat of her wings, she rose into the air, disappearing into the cold sky, leaving him standing alone in the quiet of the winter night. That night, as he sat beside the fire in his small home, warming his hands, he tried to push the image of the crane from his mind. But as the flames crackled and popped, there came a soft knock at his door. It was strange. No one ever came up to his cabin. The village was miles away, and no one travelled through these mountains in winter. Yet, when he opened the door, there she stood, a woman standing barefoot in the snow, her long white hair, like frost, glistening in the dim light. Her eyes were the same as the crane's, deep, dark, and full of mystery. Her skin was pale, and she looked as though she had to come from the very air itself, a woman of the snow, of the wind. "I've lost my way," she said, her voice soft, almost like a whisper of the wind. "May I come in?" Without thinking, he stepped aside, allowing her to enter. He gave her warmth, a hot drink to chase away the chill, and food to fill her belly. She was silent, and yet her presence filled the room. And yet her presence filled the room. A quiet grace that left him both unsettled and at ease. By morning, she had given him her name, Sulu. She never spoke of where she had come from, or why she was lost. She simply stayed, and he, in his quiet kindness, did not ask. The days grew longer, and the world began to fall. Spring whispered across the mountains, waking the earth from its deep slumber. Sulu stayed, helping him with his chores. She cooked, she cleaned, and most often she would sing softly to the wind, as though the world itself listened to her voice. She was a strange woman in some ways. Her movements were often delicate, almost bird-like, and she would sometimes stare at the sky with longing in her eyes, as if waiting for something to return to her. He noticed these things, but he said nothing. Perhaps, deep down, he understood she carried a sadness that she could never share. In time, he realized something else. He had fallen in love with her. It was a love born of quiet companionship, of shared work and laughter, of trust built over the seasons. Suluru had become not just his companion, but his heart's home, and he loved her more deeply than he had ever known was possible. But love, it seemed, could not exist in a place where trust was so fragile. As summer drew to a close, the harvests were meagre, and the weight of hunger began to settle in their small cabin. Suluru came to him one evening, a troubled look in her eyes, and asked, "Let me weave," she said. "I can make cloth unlike anything you've seen. Cloth so fine you can sell it in the capital, and we will have enough money for the winter. But," she hesitated, "you must promise me one thing. Do not open the door while I am working." He raised an eyebrows, confused. "Why?" "I cannot say, but you must trust me. Promise me." "I promise," he said, unsure of the reasons behind her request, but willing to give her this one request. She smiled faintly, her eyes glistening with something unreadable. And so, behind the closed door of the room, Suluru began to weave. For 3 nights he heard the soft rhythm of the loom, the quiet clicking and threading, the movement of her hands. It became a comforting sound, one that filled the emptiness of the cold nights. Yet he couldn't shake the unease that settled in his heart. When Suluru emerged on the 4th day, she was pale, her body trembling slightly, and she handed him a bolt of fabric. It shimmered the way moonlight shimmers on water, soft and fluid. The colour was unlike anything he had seen, a pale, ethereal silver, woven with such delicacy that it seemed to glow with its own light. "This is my gift," she said softly, her voice shaking. "I wanted to give you beauty for your compassion." He took the fabric, stunned. It felt like nothing he had ever touched before. So soft, so light, yet as strong as the threads of fate. He sold it in the village, and the merchants paid him handsomely. Enough gold to see through the winter and more. But as the days passed, Suluru did not weave again. Her hands were too tired, too weary. She would not speak of it, but he could see it in her eyes, the exhaustion of something deeper than just physical labor. He could not understand why she would not weave more, and so the hunger for answers grew inside him. A few weeks later, he asked her again to weave. He begged her, offering all the gold she could ever want in return. He promised not to look, promised to keep the door closed. But the door of curiosity, once opened, cannot be closed again. On the 2nd night, he stood outside the door, his hand hovering over the handle. His curiosity gnawed at him like a hunger he could not satisfy. Finally, against his better judgment, he promised not to look. He turned the handle and opened the door. What he saw took his breath away. Suluru was no longer a woman. She was a crane. Her body was as it had been when he first saw her, a creature of beauty, with feathers shimmering in the dim light of the room. But her wings were not the wings of a bird. No, they were the wings of a woman who had shed her human skin, who had become something both fragile and strong, both human and divine. She was pulling her own feathers from her body, one by one, and weaving them into the silk with hands that bled. The sight was both beautiful and horrific, a sacrifice of unimaginable pain. When she saw him, her eyes filled with sorrow, her human form flickering like a candle nearing its end. "You looked," she whispered. I didn't mean to," he stammered. "I was just worried. I didn't understand. Why, you—" "I told you," she said, her voice breaking. "I came to repay your kindness, to give you beauty for your compassion, and I gave you more than that. I gave you myself." She stepped towards him, trembling. "I loved you. I love you still. But love cannot live where trust has been broken." Her wings unfurled, and in a heartbeat, she was gone, rising into the snow, into the night, leaving him with nothing but the echo of her words. "I wanted to stay," she whispered as she disappeared into the night. "More than anything." He ran after her, barefoot, his heart broken, and calling her name into the wind. But the snow answered with only silence. He never remarried, he never returned to the village, and every winter he wanders the hills where the snow fell thickest, calling her name into the wind. Some say that if you listen closely in the quietest parts of winter, you can hear the soft sound of a loom still working. And if you listen even closer, you might hear the sound of feathers being woven into the fabric of time itself. She gave him beauty for his compassion, and love for his kindness, but trust. That was the only thing she asked for. Some doors are meant to stay closed, not because of what lies behind them, but because of what they protect.